Hello. Today we are going to be covering the final lesson, which is 12-10, talking about sampling and error. Now, at the beginning of this, it talks about the importance of a random sample, and you can read that in your book, and how important a random sample is, and if to determine whether or not something is truly a random sample. Okay, so I suggest that you read that part right at the beginning of the lesson in your book, so that you can kind of see what that talks about. I want to spend some time talking about this idea of a margin of error. Okay, so like this would be like your give and take a little bit. Okay, so the margin of error is defined as the limited difference between the sample and the actual results. Okay, so like if you are taking a survey and you want to represent, I don't know, the number of people that prefer Pepsi to Coke. All right, and you just survey a random sample of people in the school just to get an idea. You should have a margin of error that accompanies that, and that would be like, okay, so this random sample represents the school, but then if you were to go through and actually survey every single person in the school, it would be a little bit off. It should be close, but that little bit off part is what we call the margin of error. Okay, and it's very fitting that we use ME for margin of error. Here is the formula. It is going to be 2 times, that's not a square root, that's a 2 times the square root of P times 1 minus P all over N. Okay, what does that mean? Well, the P represents the percent responding in a certain way. Okay, so the question on your survey, what percent of that group is responding in a certain way? The N is going to be the sample size. Okay, so that tells you, like, if you have a group, or let's say you're surveying a group of 25 people, well, the N is 25, because that's the size of your sample here. Sample size, how about? Okay. So to figure out, the actual results, we typically will say, like, it's the percent, that responded either plus your margin of error or the percent minus the margin of error. And that's when I say, like, oh, you give or take a couple. Okay, that's what that basically means. You give or you take a couple. Okay, so I just have a couple of examples. This is pretty much it. It's a pretty short lesson. A couple of examples of how this is going to work. So here is the first one. In a survey of 100 randomly selected adults, 37% answered yes to a particular question. The question is not important. Make up your own question if you choose. So 37% answered yes to a particular question. What is the margin of error? Okay. So this one, we just want to know what our margin of error is. So if we look at this, it looks like we have a total total of 100 people. So the N is 100. And then the percent of people that answered a certain way, well, answered yes, would be 37%. So that would be 0.37. Make sure you convert that into a decimal. Okay, so now we just have to plug this in our formula. So the margin of error equals 2 times 0.37, that's the P, times 1 minus 0.37, all over 100. Okay, and when you plug that all in your calculator, remember this is 2 times, please be careful with that, you should get about 0.0966, which would be approximately 9.7%. Okay? So that is your margin of error, meaning like you give 9.7%, you take 9.7%. Okay? Second example. 30% of people surveyed said they had smoked cigarettes in the past week. The margin of error was 2%. How many were surveyed? Okay. So in this one, we actually have to work backwards. All right. We were given the margin of error. We were given the number of people supervised, the number of people who responded to the survey. We want to try and figure out the M. Okay, so it says that the margin of error was 2%. So in decimal, that would be 0.02. It said that 30% of people responded in the certain way. Okay, so 0.3. We have to figure out how many. All right, so let's plug in our formula and see what we get. So we have 0.2 equals 2 times 0.3 times 1 minus 0.3 all over n. Okay, now when I look at this, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to start by dividing both sides by 2. Okay, so I'm going to divide this over here. So I get 0.01 equals the square root of 0.3 times 1 minus 0.3 all over n. Okay, then to get rid of that radical, I'm going to square both sides. Okay, so you're going to square both sides. When you do that over here, you take 0.01 squared. You should get 0.0001 equals 0.3. I'm actually going to subtract these. 1 minus 0.3 is going to be 0.7 all over n. Okay. So now, if I multiply this n over here, I get 0.0001 n equals, if I multiply this together, I get 0.21. Okay? And now my last step is just to divide. So if I divide this over, it looks like n is 2,100 people. So 2,100 people were surveyed in this particular survey. Okay? That's it. So again, I know I said this at the beginning, but remember to read through that information about random sampling, because I believe there are a couple of questions about that in your assignment for today. And the rest of it is just on this margin of error stuff. So this is our last little statistics unit. So your assignment, if you can't see it on the board, is going to be on page 743 to 744, numbers 12 through 23 all, and 31 to 35 all. And that is due on Monday. Have a fantastic weekend. Make sure you make good choices, and I will see you next week. Bye!